I've been looking at the old photographs again, as is my wont. You remember that from previous occasion we were talking. You'll remember me, of course. I'm Bishop Peter Fox, and I'm coming to you courtesy of St Edward's, Castle Donington. I don't suppose that any of us had any idea how long this coronavirus thing was going to last. And here we are, already, Remembrance Day, just passed, still dealing with coronavirus. Anyway, here we are, you and I, and I'll be coming to you right through really until the new year. I don't suppose any of us ever had a Remembrance Sunday quite, well, I haven't had a year quite like this before. Remembrance Sunday was particularly strange, wasn't it? You know, it was just a different way to mark it. But I suppose we all did one way or another. We all kept our commemoration of Remembrance Sunday, even if it was only just to keep, 2 minutes silence. Very odd experience for me. Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day has always been very important to me for some reason. I suppose because when I was working every year I had the Remembrance Day services to take and to preach at. I always felt very unqualified to preach at Remembrance Day services because I never served in the army or the navy or anywhere. So I always felt looking down the pews at all those medals, people wearing medals that they had earned in war. I always felt any one of them would have had more right to stand there and speak that day than I. Because for us, of course, our generation, my generation and afterwards, remembrance isn't quite what it had been for other people. I mean, for us, it isn't really memories. It's not about remembering. It's about remembrance. Because if I look back on my memories, all my memories have been of peace. I mean, we've had our fair share of wars. I mean, apart from the First and Second World War, we grew up hearing about wars going on somewhere. I mean, the Vietnam thing dominated us completely for many years. Every time you switched the news on, there was the Vietnam War and all its horror. And we've had plenty since, haven't we? Bosnia and Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, it just goes on and on. So many wars. My memories are not my memories at all. My memories come second hand. When the lads came back from Northern Ireland, for instance, or you talked to somebody who'd just come back from Bosnia, my memories were second hand. It's memories of other people who were there. Things they told me. And the look on their faces. My memory, all the war was somewhere else. I've lived out my whole life, like most of us have, in peace. I got to do all the things you should be doing when you're young. I got the chance to dream my dreams and pursue them. In my case, I wanted to be a priest more than anything in life, and I was able to get on and work for that, go off to college. And I made all the same mistakes everybody else makes when they're young. I chased the girls and I got myself in scrapes and learned a few lessons and didn't get to learn others. I mean, I just grew up. I was a kid. My teenage years, my early 20s, I had the freedom to do what young people should be doing. So for me, Remembrance Sunday isn't really about remembering war at all. It's about remembering peace. And all my wars, all the wars I remember, all happened off camera, somewhere else. But I suppose that's an important thing. I think that's why remembrance is important. Almost more important for those of us who haven't been in a war, because we need to remember that this peace that we all take for granted isn't a cheap thing. It wasn't won cheap. Other people, a lot of other people, have paid the price, are paying the price for the freedom we enjoy. And it's important to remember that. And to remember the debt. Remember just to appreciate a little bit. I find when I think back to war, because it's mainly about talking to people who came back, I find I'm not just thinking about the people who died in the wars, or even the people who were injured in the war, maimed physically or mentally. I think about the survivors. Because if I've learned anything talking to people who were involved in our two great wars and the wars since, I think if there's anything I've learned from them, it's that nobody comes out of a war unscathed, whoever was in it, on some level, visible or otherwise. There's damage. I was going through the photograph. Actually, some years ago now, I was going through a box of photographs. There's one photograph in particular, which is one of those familiar photographs. Every family has them. Photographs that everybody knows in the family. You have them imprinted up here. We talked about that before. Well, there's one photograph, and it's a photograph of my granddad coming back from the First World War. We'd been quite lucky, really, because apart from an uncle who was killed during the Blitz in the Second World War, and another uncle who suffered serious brain damage in the First World War. Well, being blown up can do that to you. He was at the Dardanelles. Apart from that, our family's been reasonably lucky. Not too many fatalities to record, but Grandad came back from the first lot, and he survived the Somme and Passchendaele and all those things without a scratch. But he never talked about it. He never ever talked about it. Never talked about what he'd done during the 4 years of that war. And I suppose that was because he came back unscathed, but most of his friends didn't come back at all. But anyway, this photograph of my granddad that's so familiar is a photograph of him in full uniform. I have no idea whether it was taken when he was home on leave. I rather suspect it was. Or maybe it was when he was finally demobbed months and months after the war was over. Anyway, he's wearing his full artilleryman's uniform, which is quite interesting just historically to see what the uniform looked like. And for most of us in the family, the thing that really catches our attention is that he's wearing a moustache. And because the granddad, when we knew him, didn't have a moustache, but he's got a rather fine one, I think, when he came back. And then some years ago, I was going through the boxes of photographs, and I came across this one. This photograph is an enlargement taken from that familiar photograph. And I was going through the box, moved some aside, and suddenly came across this. And I couldn't remember ever seeing this enlargement before. And I suddenly realised I was seeing something I hadn't seen before. It should have been familiar to me. I was looking at my granddad's face, but in a funny kind of way, it isn't the granddad I knew. Because in the enlargement, you get a really clear view of his eyes. And I looked, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his face. There's a blankness, a sort of emptiness. And it might be a trick of the camera, but I don't think it is, because I've seen that same expression in the eyes of lads coming back from Northern Ireland. My brother-in-law served in Northern Ireland, and some of his mates, when I talked to them, that same thing, a kind of emptiness somehow in the eyes, behind the eyes. And it's the expression of someone who has been to hell and come back, but they've still got the shadow of that hell inside them. There are memories there, memories you can't possibly share. And here I am seeing it in the face of my granddad. And I'm looking at a man late 20s perhaps. And he's somebody I never actually knew. He had no idea my mother was on the way it was going to happen, let alone me. This is a young man for whom we hadn't happened yet. And he had no idea what the future held for him. But my God, he knew what was held in the past. Well, he went on to live his life and do all the ordinary things. And if you said, what happened to you in the war, Grandad? Never talked about it. So for me, Remembrance Sunday and Armistice Day are just gone now this year. For me, they're not just about the ones who died. It's about the survivors who made a great sacrifice that we can't even begin to imagine. Because they had to do things no decent human being should ever have to do. You don't just kill and walk away unscathed yourself. And no decent man should ever have to do that. And no decent man can ever forget having done it. So think about that when you're making your act of remembrance. The ones who sacrificed not their lives, but their innocence. God bless.